I stared at the first-class tickets to Venice in my hands, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. My mother's voice echoed through my apartment, complaining about the coffee I'd just served her. Teresa, darling, you know I can't drink this generic brand. I thought with your fancy job you could at least afford decent coffee. That's me. Teresa, 32, successful marketing executive and still desperately trying to please my impossible mother. I tucked the tickets into my blazer pocket and took a deep breath. Mom, I have something for you, I said, walking back to the living room where she sat perched on my cream sofa like it might bite her. If it's more coffee, I'll pass. She wrinkled her nose, pushing the full cup away. Actually, it's something better. I pulled out the tickets and held them up. Happy early birthday. Her eyes widened, perfectly manicured fingers snatching the tickets from my hand. Venice? First class? For once, she was speechless. You always talked about wanting to go, remember? When I was little, you'd show me pictures in those travel magazines. That was before your father left us for that waitress, she said sharply. Before I had to work 2 jobs to support you. I bit back a retort. She'd been playing the martyr card for 20 years, conveniently forgetting the child support checks and alimony that had paid for her shopping sprees. Well, now you can finally go, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. We can go together. 2 weeks in Venice, staying at the Belmond Hotel Cipriani. Everything's arranged. She examined the tickets closely, her expression unreadable. This must have cost a fortune. I've been saving. I thought it would be nice for us to spend some time together. She set the tickets down carefully. When do we leave? Next week. I've already cleared it with work and... Next week? She stood up abruptly. That's too soon. I need time to prepare, to shop. You can't expect me to just drop everything. Mom, please, I checked your schedule with Linda at the salon. You don't have any appointments that can't be rescheduled. She narrowed her eyes. You went behind my back? I wanted it to be a surprise. I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach, the one that always appeared when she started finding problems with my efforts. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Did you tell her yet? How'd she take it? I ignored it for now. Isabella had warned me this might not go as planned, but I'd insisted on trying. After all, everyone deserves a second chance, right? Well, my mother said finally, picking up the tickets again. I suppose I could make it work, but I'll need new luggage and clothes. You can't expect me to show up at a 5-star hotel looking like a tourist. I've thought of that too. I reached for my purse and pulled out a gift card. For that boutique you like on 5th Avenue. Her eyes lit up, the first genuine smile I'd seen all morning. She took the gift card, running her finger along its edge. You really did think of everything, didn't you? I want this to be special, Mom. A fresh start for us. She stood up, gathering her designer handbag. Well, I better get shopping then. These things take time to plan properly. As I walked her to the door, she surprised me with a quick hug. You're a good daughter, Teresa. Sometimes I forget that. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Praise and guilt all wrapped up in one neat package. Classic Mom. After she left, I finally replied to Isabella's text. She said yes. Meeting tomorrow for lunch? Isabella's response was immediate. Absolutely. Need to discuss contingency plans. I smiled, thinking of the precautions I'd already taken. The separate copies of all important documents safely stored with Isabella, the emergency funds set aside, the hotel manager already briefed. Just in case. Because while I wanted to believe this trip would heal our relationship, 20 years of disappointment had taught me to hope for the best but prepare for the worst. Looking at my mother's untouched coffee cup, I remembered something she used to say when I was little. Trust is earned, not given. Well, Mom, I thought, picking up the cup. I guess we'll both find out if you've earned it. I dumped the coffee in the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl down the drain. 1 week until Venice. 1 week until either everything changed for the better, or I learned once and for all that some relationships couldn't be fixed, no matter how much money or effort you threw at them. Either way, at least I'd know. Final boarding call for Flight 789 to Venice Marco Polo Airport. I checked my watch again, pacing near the gate. My mother was 20 minutes late, and my calls kept going straight to voicemail. A cold feeling crept into my stomach, but I pushed it away. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Miss? The gate agent caught my attention. We need to close the doors. Please, just 5 more minutes. My mother... I'm sorry, but we can't delay the flight. Swallowing hard, I handed over my boarding pass. As I walked down the jet bridge, I sent one last text. Mom, I'm boarding. Please tell me you're already on the plane. The first-class cabin was half empty. I scanned the seats, hoping to see her familiar blonde head, but she wasn't there. A flight attendant approached with a sympathetic smile. Can I help you find someone? My mother. We're traveling together. She should be in 2A. The attendant checked her tablet. I'm sorry, but no one has checked in for that seat. My hands started shaking as I sank into my seat. This wasn't happening. I pulled out my phone one last time before the doors closed, dialing Isabella. Bella, she's not here. What? Did she miss the flight? I don't know. She's not answering her phone. Could you already on it? I'll check her house, call around. The flight attendant gestured for me to end the call. We'll figure this out, Isabella said quickly. Just try to rest during the flight. 8 hours later, I stumbled through Marco Polo Airport, exhausted and worried sick. That's when I saw her. My mother standing at the baggage claim, collecting her designer suitcase. Mom, I called out, relief flooding through me. What happened? Why didn't you... She turned, and for a split second, I caught a flash of something in her eyes. Guilt? Triumph? Before she bolted toward the exit. Mom, wait. I chased after her, dragging my carry-on. As I reached for my passport at the customs checkpoint, my blood ran cold. My travel wallet was missing. The one containing my passport, cash, and credit cards. No. I emptied my purse onto a nearby bench. Nothing. Through the glass doors, I watched helplessly as my mother jumped into a waiting taxi. Miss? A customs officer approached. Is everything all right? My mother, I couldn't even finish the sentence. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Darling, did you really think I'd let you play the hero? Venice was always my dream, not our dream. Don't worry, I'll put your money to good use. Consider it payback for all those years I sacrificed for you. Love, Mom. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the bench. A young woman sitting nearby looked up from her book. Hey, are you okay? I shook my head, tears finally spilling over. My mother? She stole my passport and money. She's gone. Oh my God. The woman moved closer. I'm Presley. Let me help. We should talk to the police. The police? I laughed bitterly. In a foreign country? She's my mother. They'll never believe me. My phone buzzed again. Isabella. Teresa, your mom's house is empty. All her stuff is gone. What's happening? With trembling fingers, I typed, She took everything. The passport, the emergency cash. She planned this all along. Check your email. Isabella replied instantly. Remember Plan B? I pulled up my email, and there it was. A folder labeled Venice Emergency. Inside were scans of my passport, copies of police reports I'd filed months ago documenting my mother's previous attempts at financial fraud, and contact information for Zachary, the hotel manager I'd briefed about potential issues. Presley was still sitting beside me, her face concerned. Look, she said, I'm staying at the Bellman too. Let me help you get there and we can figure this out. My phone buzzed one more time. Isabella again. Already called the hotel. Zachary's expecting her. Remember what we discussed? Let her think she's won. The higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. I took a deep breath, wiping away my tears. Thank you, I said to Presley. I'd appreciate that ride. As we walked to the taxi stand, I thought about my mother's text. Payback, she'd said. Well, Mom, I thought, you're not the only one who knows how to play the long game. You taught me well. Maybe too well. The Belmond Hotel Cipriani, please. I told the driver, my voice steady now. Let her think she'd won. Let her enjoy her moment of triumph. Because what my mother didn't know was that her perfect plan had just triggered an avalanche she'd never see coming. The water taxi cut through Venice's Grand Canal, but I barely noticed the stunning architecture surrounding us. Presley sat beside me, already proving herself invaluable by lending me her phone charger and helping me contact the U.S. Embassy. So your mom's been planning this for months? She asked, shaking her head in disbelief. Looks that way. The desk clerk at her building said she'd been slowly moving things out for weeks. My phone rang. Isabella again. I put her on speaker. Teresa, I've got news. Your mother tried to use your credit card at Gucci 10 minutes ago, the one we left active. Perfect. I managed a small smile. Is everything in place at the hotel? Zachary's got it all under control. He said she checked in an hour ago, using your reservation. She's in for quite a surprise when she tries to charge anything to the room. Presley leaned forward. Wait, you knew this might happen? Let's just say my mother has a history. I showed her the folder on my phone. These are records of her previous incidents. The time she emptied my college fund, the jewelry she borrowed and sold, the credit cards she opened in my name. That's horrible, Presley said. Why didn't you press charges? Because she's my mother, and because I was stupid enough to keep believing she'd change. The water taxi pulled up to the Bellman's private dock. Zachary was already waiting there, his tall figure impossible to miss in his impeccable suit. Miss Teresa, he said, helping me onto the dock. We've been expecting you. Your mother seems quite comfortable in the presidential suite. The presidential suite? I raised an eyebrow. I booked the garden view room. She insisted on an upgrade. Attempted to charge it to your card, naturally. He smiled thinly. We declined, but allowed her to stay there temporarily. We thought you might want to surprise her. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. The view from up here is divine, darling. You should see how the sunset hits the water. Oh, wait, you can't. I showed the text to Zachary, who shook his head in disapproval. We have security footage of her arrival, he said, and of her attempting to use your cards. The police have been notified, but they're waiting for your signal before approaching. Presley touched my arm. I have to check in, but my room is on the 3rd floor if you need anything. Room 312. Thank you, I said sincerely, for everything. After she left, Zachary led me to his office. Isabella's face appeared on his computer screen via video call. Okay, Isabella said. Time to review the plan. Teresa, are you sure about this? We can still call the police right now. I thought about all the years of manipulation, the countless times I'd forgiven her, the way she'd smiled when I gave her those tickets. No, she needs to learn. Really learn this time. All right, then. Isabella pulled up a document. The hotel's security cameras are all active. We've got copies of her fraudulent charges. The embassy's sending over temporary documents. And I've contacted some interesting people from her past who are very eager to share their stories. Zachary handed me a room key. You'll be in the executive suite, 1 floor below her. We've disabled her room keys. She'll need to come to the front desk to get back in if she leaves. Perfect. I checked my watch. She'll be heading to dinner soon. She never misses a chance to be seen in a fancy restaurant. The Oro restaurant is fully booked, Zachary confirmed. But mysteriously, there's one table available, right in the center of the room. Isabella's voice turned serious. Teresa, remember, let her dig herself deeper. Let her think she's untouchable. The higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. I finished. I remember. A knock at the office door made us all jump. Presley poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. Your mother's heading to the restaurant, and she's wearing what looks like a very expensive new dress. I stood up, smoothing my travel-wrinkled clothes. Time to get ready, then. Your luggage has been delivered to your room, Zachary said, including the dress Isabella had sent over. I looked at my best friend's face on the screen. You thought of everything, didn't you? That's what best friends are for. She grinned. Now go get changed. Your mother wants to make a scene? Let's give her one she'll never forget. As I headed to my room, I felt strangely calm. Maybe because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win my mother's approval. I wasn't trying to fix her or change her or understand her. I was simply going to show her exactly what it felt like to be on the receiving end of betrayal. And thanks to my friends, old and new, I wouldn't have to do it alone. The Oro restaurant glittered with candlelight and wealth. I stood in the entrance, wearing the sleek black dress Isabella had chosen, watching my mother hold court at the center table. She'd already gathered an audience, 2 older couples hanging on her every word. And then I said to my daughter, she was saying, gesturing with her wine glass, "Darling, you work too hard. Let me handle the travel arrangements." I moved closer, silent in my heels. The poor dear is so consumed with her career, she barely has time for family, she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. That's why I insisted on taking this trip. Someone has to show her how to enjoy life. How generous of you, I said loudly, making her jump. Please, Mom, tell them more about how you're spending my money. The color drained from her face. Teresa, I thought you couldn't make it. Clearly. I turned to her new friends. Did she tell you how she got here? About stealing my passport and credit cards? The couples exchanged uncomfortable glances. Teresa, darling, you're making a scene. My mother hissed, her smile strained. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? You didn't seem concerned about privacy when you left me stranded at the airport. Zachary appeared at my side. Is everything all right here? My mother's face brightened. Yes. I was just about to order another bottle of wine. The 82 Bordeaux, I think. I'm afraid that won't be possible, madam. Your credit cards have been declined and the room charges have been suspended. There must be some mistake. She reached for her purse, my travel wallet, but I was faster. Looking for this? I held up a second wallet, identical to the one she'd stolen. Amazing what you can do with a color printer and some basic crafting skills. Her eyes widened as she opened her stolen wallet, finding only carefully crafted replicas of my cards and documents. The real ones are safe with Isabella, I said, along with evidence of every fraudulent charge you've tried to make today. The other diners were openly staring now. My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. How dare you embarrass me like this, after everything I've done for you? You mean like emptying my college fund? Or maxing out the credit cards you opened in my name when I was 18? I paid those back. With money you stole from your sister. Yes, Aunt Sarah told me everything. She grabbed her purse. I don't have to listen to this. I'm going to my room. Your room? Zachary stepped forward. I believe you mean the presidential suite that you attempted to charge to a fraudulent credit card? I'm afraid we'll need you to vacate immediately. You can't do this to me. She looked around wildly, but her dinner companions were suddenly very interested in their meals. Security is waiting to escort you out, Zachary said calmly. Unless you'd prefer we call the police? My mother's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... Careful, Mom. I nodded toward the security cameras. Everything's being recorded. She straightened her spine, trying to salvage her dignity. Fine, I'll leave. But don't think this is over. Oh, it's not, I agreed. We're just getting started. By the way, how many of your new friends here know about the Williams family? She froze. You wouldn't. Tomorrow's another day, Mom. And I learned from the best how to destroy someone's reputation. 2 security guards appeared at the restaurant entrance. My mother marched past them, head held high, but I caught the tremor in her hands. Your mother's belongings have been removed from the suite, Zachary murmured. We've arranged a room for her at a more suitable hotel across town. Perfect. I sat down at her abandoned table, picking up her half-empty wine glass. And the other arrangements? All in place for tomorrow's gala. Several guests are particularly interested in meeting your mother. I smiled, taking a sip of wine. Excellent. My phone buzzed. Isabella sending a video link. Security footage from the hotel lobby showed my mother trying to argue at the front desk, then being escorted out by security, her designer suitcases wheeled behind her. Sweet dreams, Mom, I whispered, raising the glass in a mock toast. Tomorrow's going to be a day you'll never forget. Across the restaurant, Presley caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. Other diners were whispering, phones out, no doubt sharing the evening's drama on social media. Let them talk. Let the story spread. Because tomorrow, at the hotel's prestigious summer gala, they'd learn what my mother was really capable of. Not just from me, but from every person she'd ever betrayed. And this time, there would be nowhere left for her to run. The hotel's grand ballroom buzzed with Venice's elite, champagne flowing freely as string musicians played in the corner. I stood near the entrance with Presley, watching my mother work the room. Despite last night's humiliation, she'd managed to talk her way into the gala, dressed in what I recognized as my missing Valentino gown. Your mother's got nerve, I'll give her that, Presley whispered. Just wait. I checked my phone. Isabella, are we ready? Everyone's in position. Isabella's voice came through my earpiece. The Williams family just arrived. And guess who else showed up? Robert from the investment firm. My mother's former boss, the one whose signature she'd forged on company documents. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, Zachary's voice boomed through the speakers. Welcome to our annual summer gala. Right on cue, the massive screens around the ballroom lit up with security footage from yesterday. My mother attempting to use stolen credit cards, throwing a tantrum at the front desk, being escorted out. The crowd fell silent. My mother froze mid-conversation, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the marble floor. Some of you may recognize this woman, I said, stepping onto the small stage. Giselle, my mother, expert con artist, master manipulator, and tonight's guest of honor. Teresa, stop this immediately. She tried to march toward me, but 2 security guards blocked her path. Why stop? You always taught me to finish what I start. I gestured to the screens. And we're just getting started. Would anyone like to hear about the Williams Family Trust Fund? An elderly couple stepped forward, the Williams looking exactly as their photos showed. She convinced our grandson to invest his entire inheritance in a fake company, Mrs. Williams said, her voice shaking with anger. He was only 19. That's a lie, my mother shouted. Teresa, how dare you arrange this circus? Is it a lie, Giselle? A man in an expensive suit emerged from the crowd. Robert, looking older but just as intimidating as I remembered. Like the documents you forged with my signature? The ones that lost my clients millions? The whispers grew louder. My mother's face had gone chalk white. Or perhaps, I continued, we should ask Linda about the charity fundraiser money that mysteriously disappeared. Linda, a woman in her 60s, stepped forward. $300,000 meant for children's cancer research. Gone. This is ridiculous, my mother sputtered. These people are all lying. Teresa is trying to ruin me because she's jealous of my success. Success? I laughed. Let's talk about success, Mom. Show them the accounts, Isabella. The screens changed to display bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, all showing a pattern of theft and fraud spanning decades. Your success was built on stealing from others, including your own daughter. I turned to the crowd. She emptied my college fund when I was 17, opened credit cards in my name, and just yesterday she stole my passport and tried to strand me at the airport. You ungrateful little... She lunged forward, but the guards held firm. Ungrateful? A new voice rang out. Aunt Sarah emerged from the crowd. Like you were ungrateful when our parents left me the house? When you forged my signature to take out a second mortgage? My mother's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Sarah, please. The police are waiting outside, Zachary announced, along with representatives from 3 different banks' fraud departments. You can't prove anything, my mother said desperately, but her voice wavered. Actually, we can. I nodded to Isabella, who had just entered the ballroom. Every document, every fraud, every lie. We have proof of all of it. And thanks to your performance tonight, we have dozens of witnesses. The crowd had formed a circle around my mother, their faces showing disgust and recognition as they connected her to various scams and schemes they'd heard about. "This isn't over," she hissed, but the threat sounded hollow. "You're right, Mom. It's not over. It's just beginning. The police want to talk to you about identity theft. The banks want to discuss fraud. And I'm sure all these lovely people have their own questions." As the police entered the ballroom, my mother did something I'd never seen before. She began to cry. Not her usual calculated tears, but genuine, messy sobs. "Teresa, please. I'm your mother. Yes, you are. And you taught me everything I know about revenge." I turned away as the police approached her, including how to serve it cold. The crowd parted as they led her out, her mascara running, my stolen dress dragging on the floor. Years of carefully crafted lies and manipulation, unraveling in a single night. Isabella hugged me tightly. "You okay?" I watched my mother's retreating figure, feeling nothing but a profound sense of relief. "I'm free," I said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm actually free. The morning after the gala, I sat in Zachary's office with Isabella, Presley, and a growing group of my mother's victims. The Williams family brought coffee and pastries. Linda from the Charity Foundation had files stretching back 15 years. Aunt Sarah clutched a stack of forged documents. "The police found her trying to book a flight to Switzerland," Isabella announced, hanging up her phone. "Using another stolen credit card, of course." "Some people never learn," Aunt Sarah sighed, spreading her papers across the desk. "Look at this. She even forged Mom's signature on her will, a week before she died." Linda leaned forward. "That matches her pattern. She targeted my foundation right after my husband passed away. She knew I'd be too grief-stricken to notice the missing funds. She waited until our grandson was dealing with a bad breakup," Mrs. Williams added. She always struck when people were vulnerable. My phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. I put it on speaker. "Teresa?" My mother's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "They're keeping me at the station. You have to help me." "Like you helped me at the airport?" "That was different. I'm your mother. You can't let them do this to me." Aunt Sarah grabbed the phone. "Giselle, you remember that summer house you convinced Dad to sign over to you? The police found some interesting documents in the safe there." Silence then. "Sarah, what are you doing there?" "Having a lovely chat with your other victims. Did you really think Teresa was the only one you hurt?" "You don't understand," my mother pleaded. "I had no choice. After Richard left me—" "Stop." I took the phone back. "Dad left because he caught you embezzling from his company. He didn't abandon us. You drove him away." "That's not true." "I talked to him last night, Mom. For the first time in 20 years. Want to know what he said?" More silence. "He told me about the money you stole, the clients you defrauded. He tried to protect me by taking the blame, letting me think he was the bad guy who abandoned us." "Teresa, please. The police have his statement now, along with statements from everyone else in this room. Do you want to know how many people came forward after the gala? How many lives you destroyed?" A choked sob came through the speaker. "I can explain everything." "Save it for your lawyer." I ended the call. Mrs. Williams touched my hand gently. "You're nothing like her, dear." Standing up to her took real courage. "She's right," Presley said. "I've only known you a few days, but I've seen how different you are from her." Isabella pulled up something on her laptop. "Speaking of differences, you should see this." She turned the screen to show a news website. The headline read, "International con artist exposed at Venice Hotel Gala. Decades of fraud uncovered." "It's going viral," Isabella said. "People are coming forward from all over. That charity scam in Paris? The real estate fraud in London? All her. The detective wants to meet with everyone," Zachary added, entering with fresh coffee. "They're building a case for international fraud charges." Linda stood up, straightening her jacket. "Well, I for one am ready to tell them everything. 20 years of silence is enough." One by one, they left for the police station, each carrying their pieces of my mother's elaborate web of lies. Finally, only Isabella, Presley, and I remained. What happens now? Presley asked. I walked to the window, watching boats cruise down the canal. Now we make sure she can't hurt anyone else. The banks are freezing all her accounts, Isabella reported, and they're investigating everyone she worked with. Your dad's helping track down her overseas assets. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. This time, a text. Your father was weak. You're weak too. You think this is over? I raised you, Teresa. I made you who you are. You'll never be free of me. I showed the message to Isabella, who immediately started typing on her laptop. Got it. Sending this to the detective now. She's not supposed to contact you. She's scared, Presley observed. That's why she's lashing out. Good. I deleted the message. She should be scared, because tomorrow every single person in this room is meeting with the prosecutor, and we all have stories to tell. Isabella closed her laptop with a satisfied smile. Want to know the best part? That Valentino dress she wore to the gala? The security cameras caught her stealing it from your room. That's another charge to add to the list. For the first time since this all began, I laughed. Really laughed. Because my mother was right about one thing. She did make me who I am. She taught me to be smart, to be careful, to always have a backup plan. She just never expected me to use those lessons against her. The courthouse in Venice was smaller than I expected. I sat in the front row watching my mother in her prison-issued clothes, a far cry from her stolen designer wardrobe. The preliminary hearing had drawn a crowd, including every person she'd wronged who could make it to Italy. The prosecution calls Teresa to the stand, the prosecutor announced in Italian, with the court translator echoing in English. As I walked to the witness stand, my mother caught my eye. You don't have to do this, darling, she said softly. Family protects family. Is that what you were doing when you left me stranded at the airport? Her lawyer shushed her as I took my seat. Please state your relationship to the defendant, the prosecutor began. She's my mother, though I use that term loosely now. Can you describe the events that led to her arrest? I recounted everything, the stolen passport, the credit cards, the elaborate setup at the hotel. With each detail, my mother's face grew darker. And this wasn't the first incident, was it? The prosecutor prompted. No, when I was 17, Objection. My mother suddenly stood up. I demand to speak to my daughter alone. The judge banged his gavel. Sit down, Mrs. O'Connor. You don't understand, she pleaded. She's confused. I was protecting her inheritance. By stealing it? I shot back. By opening credit cards in my name? Everything I did was for you. The judge banged his gavel again. One more outburst and you'll be removed from the court. Isabella squeezed my hand as I continued testifying. I detailed every scheme, every manipulation, every betrayal. The college fund, the forged documents, the stolen identities. And what about your father? The prosecutor asked. He's provided a written statement, I said, explaining how she embezzled from his company and framed him for it. My mother's composure finally cracked. Richard was weak. He would have lost everything if I hadn't taken control. Remove the defendant, the judge ordered. As security approached, my mother turned to the courtroom. You're all weak. None of you understand what it takes to succeed in this world. We understand right from wrong, Aunt Sarah called out. Something you never learned. They led my mother away, but not before she got in one last shot. I made you strong, Teresa. Everything you are is because of me. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Isabella hugged me tight while Presley kept the reporters at bay. You did great, Isabella said, and wait until she finds out about tomorrow's witnesses. How many are testifying? Presley asked. 23 so far, a familiar voice answered. I turned to see my father walking toward us, looking older but still familiar. Dad. I hadn't seen him in person since the phone call. He wrapped me in a hug that felt 20 years overdue. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have fought harder for you. You're here now. I said, wiping away tears. That's what matters. The prosecutor approached with new papers. We've found 3 more victims willing to testify, and evidence of fraud in 6 countries. She'll never get out, will she? I asked. Not for a very long time. Back in the courtroom, my mother sat subdued, finally seeming to grasp the gravity of her situation. Her lawyer looked overwhelmed by the mounting evidence. The prosecution calls Richard to the stand, the translator announced. My father squared his shoulders and walked forward. My mother's head snapped up. Richard, please. She tried one last time. Think about our family. I am, he said firmly. That's why I'm here. As he began to testify about the company fraud, I watched my mother's face. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear there. Not manipulation, not calculated tears, but genuine terror as her carefully constructed world crumbled. Would you like to make a statement? The judge asked her when my father finished. She stood slowly, looking around the courtroom at all the faces of those she'd betrayed. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. I don't know how to be any other way. That's not an excuse, I said clearly. That's why you're here. The judge nodded. We'll resume tomorrow with additional witnesses. As they led my mother back to her cell, she looked over her shoulder at me one last time. I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Recognition. Not of me as her daughter, her victim, or her downfall, but of herself, reflected back in all her broken pieces. The woman who thought she could control everything was finally, completely powerless. And I was finally, completely free. The verdict came down like a thunderclap. 20 years in prison, no possibility of parole for at least 15. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and grand larceny across 6 countries. As the judge read out the sentence, my mother sat perfectly still, her face a blank mask. Do you have any final words for the court? The judge asked. She stood slowly, turning not to the judge but to me. I thought I was teaching you to survive, to be strong. I didn't realize I was teaching you how to destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Mom. I just showed everyone the truth. The bailiff stepped forward to lead her away, but she resisted for a moment. Will you visit me? No. One word. Simple, final, free. They let her out, and the courtroom erupted in quiet conversation. Isabella squeezed my hand while Presley hugged me from the other side. My father stood nearby, talking with Aunt Sarah. Miss Teresa? Zachary appeared at my elbow. There's something you should see. He led our group to the courthouse steps where dozens of people waited. More victims, more stories, more lives touched by my mother's web of deceit. They all came forward after the news broke. Isabella explained. Some traveled from as far as Australia. A young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. My grandmother lost everything to your mother's investment scam. Now we can finally get closure. One by one, they shared their stories. Each one felt like a weight lifting, a chain breaking, a wound healing. What happens now? Presley asked as we walked back to the hotel. Now? I looked at the sunset over Venice's canals, the view my mother had tried to steal. Now we heal. All of us. In the hotel lobby, Zachary handed me a letter. This arrived for you. The return address was the women's prison. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. My dearest Teresa, it began. By the time you read this, I'll have been sentenced. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that in the end, you proved me wrong. I thought love was weakness. You proved it was strength. You gathered an army of broken people and made them whole again. You turned my victims into warriors. You are everything I never could be. Strong without being cruel. Powerful without being destructive. I'm not sorry for what I did. I don't know how to be. But I am proud of what you've become, even if it meant becoming my downfall. Maybe that's the only good thing I ever did. Creating the person who would finally stop me. Goodbye, my darling daughter. Make a better life than I did. Love, Mom. I handed the letter to Isabella, who read it and passed it around. Do you believe her? My father asked gently. It doesn't matter, I replied. Her words don't have power over me anymore. The hotel restaurant had prepared a special dinner for our group, all the people who'd helped bring my mother to justice. As we sat down, Isabella raised her glass. To Teresa, who turned a nightmare into a revolution. To justice, Aunt Sarah added. To freedom, my father said. I looked around the table at these faces, some new friends, some old family, all united by a shared journey toward healing. My phone buzzed with messages from other victims around the world, sharing their stories of recovery and renewal. To all of us, I said, raising my glass, for choosing truth over fear. Later that night, I stood on my hotel balcony, watching the lights of Venice twinkle across the water. Presley joined me, 2 cups of coffee in hand. So what's next for you? She asked. Isabella and I are starting a support network for fraud victims, I said. And Dad's helping set up a legal fund for people who can't afford to fight back. Turning pain into purpose, she nodded. That's real strength. My phone buzzed one last time. A news alert. My mother's face stared back from the screen, but it didn't affect me anymore. She looked small now, diminished, just another criminal in prison clothes. I deleted the alert without reading it. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Presley. Living well, being happy, helping others. Your mother never understood that kind of power. No, I agreed. She never did. The night air was warm and sweet with possibility. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, their sound carrying across the water like a reminder that even the darkest stories can end in light. I didn't need my mother's approval anymore. I didn't need her love or her lessons or her twisted version of strength. I had something better. Truth, justice, and a family of choice who showed me what real love looks like. That was worth more than all the stolen fortunes in the world.